digestion process occurs in human beings. Now, when we keep the food into the mouth, we have a cavity in the mouth that is called as a mouth cavity or oral cavity, or we can say it as a buccal cavity. Now, after we keep the food into the buccal cavity, let us see what are the changes that occur in our buccal cavity. So, here in our buccal cavity, 4 parts are present. One is teeth. Teeth are present in our mouth cavity. Do you know what is the use of our teeth? Helps to cut and crush the food materials. Now, tongue. You know, tongue is a muscle. It is a muscular organ. Helps to mix the food material and also helps to push the food material to the next part of the digestive tract. Understand? And next coming to the jaws. So, while chewing process, the food get mixed up, and for the mixing of food, our lower jaw will move forward, backward and side by side. It moves, helps to mix the food and also to push the food into the next part of the digestive tract. And here food is mixing in the buccal cavity. With what material food is mixing? Here in our mouth cavity, there are glands are present that produce some substances. That glands are called as salivary glands. So, the salivary glands are present in our mouth cavity or buccal cavity. And when we keep the food into our buccal cavity, the salivary glands produce a substance called as saliva. Saliva. So, food get mixed up with saliva. The process of cutting and chewing of food and mixing of food totally occurs in our buccal cavity. That process of cutting and chewing or crushing of food and mixing of food with saliva and makes the food slimy and slippery. The total process is called as mastication. What is mastication? It is a process of cutting and crushing of food materials. So, teeth, what is the function of teeth? They cut the food materials. When we keep the large particles of food into our mouth, they cut the food into smaller substances. And while cutting the food materials, salivary gland secretes saliva into the buccal cavity and mixed up with food materials. And because of the mixing of food with saliva, food gets slimy and slippery and make it easy to pass the food into the next part of the digestive tract. Understand? So, here to produce the saliva, we have 3 pairs of salivary glands in the buccal cavity. Now, let us see the names of 3 pairs of salivary glands and the location of the salivary glands in the buccal cavity. Now, let us see the 3 pairs of salivary glands which are located in our buccal cavity. Now, the first pair of salivary glands called parotid glands. Parotid glands which are located in the palate. You know what is palate? The roof of the mouth cavity. When we open our mouth or buccal cavity, if you see the roof, the upper portion of the mouth cavity is called as palate. It is located in the palate. On the back of the palate it is located. And coming to the sublingual glands. A pair of sublingual glands are located below the tongue. Below the tongue. And next, third pair is submandibular glands. What it is? Submandibular glands which are located to the sides of the jaws. On the side of the lower jaw, these pair of salivary glands are located. These salivary glands mainly produce a substance called as a saliva. This saliva get mixed up with food material, and this saliva consists of an enzyme which helps in the breakdown of carbohydrates, carbohydrates, that enzyme which is present in saliva is called as salivary amylase. What it is? The enzyme present in the saliva called as salivary amylase is the enzyme. It is also called as ptyalin. P silent here. Ptyalin is the other name for the salivary amylase. And here this is the enzyme where it starts the breakdown of carbohydrates. Breakdown of carbohydrates. We know that food components. There are different nutrients are present in the food like carbohydrates, proteins, fats. These are the three major components. So for the digestion of these three major components, so important enzymes are present. One of the important enzyme which is helpful for the breakdown or the digestion of the carbohydrates is called as salivary amylase or ptyalin. Understand? And here with the help of enzymes, whatever the component which is taken into our digestive system will be broken down into simpler molecules. Understand? This process of breakdown of complex food what we keep in our mouth into simple substances is called as a digestion. Understand what is meant by digestion process? When we keep the food materials, directly that food will not give energy for us. The food has to be broken down into simple substances. That substances only enter into the blood and cells to give energy. Understand? So for that process of making the complex food into simple food, the enzymes are useful. So what is the enzyme present in the saliva? Salivary amylase. What is the other name for salivary amylase? Ptyalin. P silent here. P-T-Y-A-L-I-N. P silent. Ptyalin. So on which nutrient this act and break down that food component? Carbohydrates. So in the mouth cavity or in the buccal cavity itself, the digestion process will start. Understand? Got the definition for the digestion? The process of break down the complex food substances into simple food substances by the action of enzymes. Understand? Like these enzymes, many will be produced in the further parts of the digestive tract. Now let us see, after chewing the food materials in the mouth, the food gets slurry and slippery, and when we swallow the food moves to the next part of the digestive tract, that is called as pharynx. Before entering the food into the pharynx, food gets chewed by teeth and food gets mixed up with saliva, and tongue and jaw, lower jaw helps in the mixing of food materials and helps to push the food materials into the pharynx and other part, next part of the pharynx, that is esophagus. And here in the buccal cavity, food becomes soft because of the chewing process and because of the mixing of food with the saliva. And due to the mixing of food with saliva, food becomes soft. The soft chewed food in the mouth cavity or buccal cavity is called as a bolus. What is bolus? The chewed food in the mouth cavity is called as a bolus. Now this bolus moves to the next part of the alimentary canal. And before going to that parts, let us see the location of the salivary glands in the picture. So if you see the picture of our buccal cavity, we can see the three pairs of salivary glands here. One is parotid gland, which is located in the palate, and sublingual glands, which are located below the tongue, and submandibular glands, which are located on the sides of the lower jaw. Here mandibule means jaw. Understand? That's why as the pair of salivary glands located on the sides of the jaws, we call them as submandibular glands. After that, from the buccal cavity, because of the swallowing process, food moves into the pharynx. It is a junction, it is a part just useful to pass the food to the next part of the digestive tract. And here from this pharynx, food moves to the esophagus. So here esophagus is a muscular tube-like structure. It is a muscular tube-like structure that opens into the stomach. This is esophagus. And here as it is made with muscles show some contractions and relaxations. And because of the contraction and relaxations of the muscles of esophagus, some wave-like movement is produced in the esophagus. So that wave-like movement is called as a peristaltic movement. What movement? Peristaltic movement. What is meant by peristaltic movement? A wave-like movement which is seen in the muscles of the esophagus. So why this wave-like movement is producing in the muscles? To send the food from pharynx to the stomach. Understand? So a wave-like movement is formed here. So some muscles will contract and some muscles will relax to push the food materials to the stomach. Now let us see how this wave-like movement pushes the food into the stomach through the esophagus. So if you observe the picture, we can see some muscles above the food materials gets contracted and around the food the muscles are relaxed, and like that contractions and relaxation muscles of the esophagus moves the food into the next part in the form of a wave-like movement. That wave-like movement, what we see in the esophagus is called as a peristaltic movement, or we can say it as a peristalsis. So this peristaltic movements helps to push the food in a forward movement in the digestive tract. Food comes to the stomach. So in the stomach, if you see, when compared to all other parts, stomach is in a different structure and shape in the digestive tract. If you see from mouth to anus, except stomach, remaining all parts are in a tube-like form. But here stomach is a muscular bag-like structure which helps to store the food temporarily while digesting the food materials. Now let us see what changes occurs in the stomach. Now let us see the structure of stomach. So generally food from esophagus passes into the stomach by a peristaltic wave-like movement, and now the total food which will be stored temporarily in the stomach will be churned or mixed by the movement of muscles present in the stomach. So as we know that all the structures are made with muscles, this stomach is also a muscular bag-like structure. It is also made with muscle. That's why we call it as a muscular bag-like structure. And this muscular bag-like structure helps to mix the food material or churn the food materials or grind the food materials with the help of muscle contractions and relaxations. During this time, there are some glands present in the wall of the stomach. The wall of the stomach consists of some glands. That glands are called as gastric glands. Like how buccal cavity consists of salivary glands, in the same way here also the stomach is having some glands called as gastric glands. These gastric glands secrete a juice called as a gastric juice. Along with that, an acid is produced that is called hydrochloric acid. That's what we call as HCl. Understand? So, in the gastric glands, these two secretions are released into the stomach. Two secretions like gastric juice and HCl are released into the stomach. Now, this gastric juice consists of an enzyme called as pepsin. An enzyme called as pepsin. It is an enzyme, digestive enzyme that helps in the breakdown of proteins. In the buccal cavity, carbohydrate digestion started by salivary amylase. Now here in the stomach, the protein digestion will start by an enzyme called as pepsin. Understand? Now this pepsin helps in the breakdown of proteins. Already carbohydrates were broken down, and here the pepsin break down the proteins. And here along with this pepsin, HCl also produced in the stomach. And here this HCl, hydrochloric acid, function is to kill any bacteria or any microorganisms that enter into our system through food materials. So through food, if any microbes are entered into the body, then immediately in the stomach this hydrochloric acid will kill all the germs that enter into our body. In such a way this HCl is useful, and also it is useful to activate the inactive enzymes. Suppose if you see, the enzyme which is produced in the stomach is pepsin. Basically this pepsin is first produced as inactive enzyme. That inactive enzyme name is Pepsinogen. Pepsinogen. Basically pepsin directly as it is will not be secreted in the stomach. It will be produced as inactive form of pepsin, that is called as Pepsinogen. It is inactive enzyme. Inactive means there will be no action. So it is not useful for the digestion. So when HCl is produced, then this hydrochloric acid activate this pepsinogen into pepsin. So if no HCl, no protein digestion. Why? Because the pepsin is produced as inactive form. That will not be converted into active form if there is no hydrochloric acid. That's why we can say that hydrochloric acid not only kills the microbes that enter into our system through food, and also activates the inactive form of enzymes into active form of enzymes. Understand? This is about the functioning of hydrochloric acid. As it is acid, so this total acid gets mixed up with food in the stomach, food becomes acidic in nature. And the muscle movements helps to crush the food materials, so that food becomes semi-solid in the stomach. Food becomes semi-solid in the stomach. And here by the entering of food into the stomach, already some carbohydrates were digested, and also here in the stomach some proteins were digested. Means not complete carbohydrates will not digest by the entering of food into the stomach, and here partial digestion of carbohydrates and proteins occurs in the stomach. That's why the semi-solid form of food is formed, not completely a liquid form or not completely a solid form, a semi-solid. Why it became semi-solid? Some carbohydrates were digested and some proteins were digested. And here, because of the partial digestion of carbohydrates and proteins, food becomes semi-solid. That semi-solid, partially digested food in the stomach is called as a chyme. Understand? So in the buccal cavity, the chewed food is called as a bolus. Bolus comes to stomach. Now in the stomach, protein digestion will start and food becomes semi-solid, and that semi-solid food which is formed in the stomach is called as a chyme. So after the production of chyme in the stomach, now the food has to move from stomach to the first part of the small intestine, that is called as a duodenum. So here, as the more amount of food is present in the stomach, total food at a time will not move into the duodenum. Here, to control or to regulate the movement of food materials from stomach to the duodenum, here there is a muscle sphincter is present between stomach and duodenum. That muscle sphincter is called as pyloric sphincter. Understand? Due to the presence of this pyloric sphincter at the end of the stomach, the lower part of the stomach is called as a pyloric stomach. Before we discussed, two parts are there in the stomach. One is, upper part is cardiac stomach, lower part is pyloric stomach. So due to the presence of the pyloric sphincter at the end of the stomach, we call this stomach as a lower part of the stomach as pyloric stomach. And here this pyloric muscle sphincter helps to movement of food from stomach to duodenum. So this sphincter will not allow the total movement of food into the duodenum at a time. It helps in the movement of small quantities of food from stomach to duodenum. Now let us go through what are the changes that occur in the duodenum. So the food in the stomach is in acidic in nature due to the mixing of hydrochloric acid with the stomach. So food in the stomach is called as chyme. Food is in acidic in nature. And now that acidic natured food moves in a little quantities, small quantities from stomach to duodenum through the pyloric sphincter. Now let us see the process of digestion that occurs in the small intestine. As we already seen in the diagram, we can find there are three main parts in the small intestine. It is the longest part among all other parts in the digestive system. And it consists of three main parts. One is duodenum, then is jejunum and is ileum. These three parts together called small intestine. And with this small intestine, two digestive glands are connected. Two digestive glands are connected with this, and also in the small intestine there is another glands are present, that is called intestinal glands. Intestinal glands. So totally two digestive glands are opened into the duodenum, and also entire the length of small intestine we can see the presence of intestinal glands. Now let us see the important glands that were opened and what is the juice that is secreted in the glands and what are the enzymes that are produced in the juice and how they are helpful for the digestion process. If you see the main glands that are opened into the duodenum, the first one is liver. It is the largest digestive gland which is present in the body. Largest gland also, not only the digestive gland, among all other glands this is the largest gland. And this liver is situated on the right side of our abdominal cavity, and it releases a juice called as a bile juice. What it is, Amma? Bile juice. It releases a juice called as a bile juice. And here generally in the salivary glands, saliva contains an enzyme, and in the gastric glands produce a juice called gastric juice that contains enzyme. And here if you see the bile juice, it don't have any enzymes. The bile juice has no enzymes. Here it is very important to observe. Why? Here the bile juice, though it is not having any enzyme, how it plays an important role in the digestion process. So why we are discussing this bile juice in the digestion process, though any enzyme is not present in the bile juice. Now if you see, till the food enters into the small intestine, fat digestion will not occur. Understand? In the mouth carbohydrate digestion started, and in the stomach protein digestion started. Till now we are not discussed about the fat digestion. Now it's the time for the discussion of fat digestion. And here for the digestion of the fats, we need to discuss about bile juice. Here bile juice plays an important role in the conversion of complex fats into simple fats. Understand? Here we have to know that fats are very complex food substances when compared to carbohydrates and proteins. Fats are more complex food substances, and it is a very complex process to digest the fats also. Why it is complex means, to digest the fats, first fats have to be converted into simple fats. Whatever the fat we eat is a complex fat. So that complex fat to digest, they have to convert into simple fat, then only fats will digest. So to convert the complex fat into simple fats, this bile juice is useful. That conversion of complex fat into simple fat is called as emulsification. What do you call that process? Emulsification. What is meant by emulsification? Conversion of complex fats into simple fats. Now let us write the definition, very important definition here. The process of conversion of complex fats into simple or smaller fats. We can say smaller fats. This process is called emulsification. If this process is done, then only fats will start digestion. So for this process of emulsification, bile juice is useful. Understand? This is about bile juice which is producing by liver. Generally liver produce this bile juice and store in a small sac-like structure which is located near the liver. So if you see the diagram of the liver, so here we can see a small sac-like structure. This is called as a gallbladder. So gallbladder is a structure where the bile juice will be stored. So whenever the fat, we take the fat in our diet, this gallbladder releases the bile juice from the gallbladder, and then fats emulsification will occur. That is about liver. And then coming to the pancreas. This is present opposite to the liver, that opens into the duodenum. It is also a very important digestive gland, and it appears like a leaf below the stomach. And this pancreas produce a juice called as a pancreatic juice. Pancreas produce a juice called as a pancreatic juice. And this pancreatic juice consists of some enzymes. Now let us evaluate today's content. What are the different parts help in mastication of food in buccal cavity? What is bolus? How many pairs of salivary glands present in buccal cavity? What is the movement seen in esophagus to move the food into stomach? What is the juice secreted by gastric glands? What will happen if HCl is not secreted in the stomach? Which juice has no enzymes? What is emulsification? Thank you.